Welcome to the Port Huron Statement. I want to talk about something. I want to talk about solutions rather than just the problems. I want to talk about something that sounds big and abstract at first glance. A new kind of economic system. I call it broadly the Altruism Economy. It is built around a non-zero sum gain model. It's built on the concept of a money supply backed on value creation and productivity. I've been calling Halcoin or Anchor as a term for the currency. Halcoin was the original idea as a placeholder, but I've been offered Anchor by assorted contributors in the development of this. Assorted actors. This isn't tear everything down and start over. It's not AI decides what your life is worth. It's much simpler and much more practical than that. It's about counting real value honestly and using that honesty to stop sleepwalking into an economic collapse that doesn't have to happen. And what I'm talking about is our antiquated money supply situation. Where we actually are right now is far worse. It is a far worse situation than I think you realize. The rapid change in the Fed interest rates on a Sunday says it all. Let me start with the part everyone can feel in their homes. Prices are jumping way faster than the official inflation numbers suggest. Food distributors, small shops, bike shops, restaurants, people who see wholesale prices and retail prices and are watching the cost jump 20 to 50 cents over the 20 to 50%, in a couple of months on key and staple items. Also, finished durable goods. Wages are not following. Cost of living is going up. And the way we've been solving these problems is by printing more money, handing it to the very top, and let everyone else fight over what crumbs trickle to the floor. If this weren't the US dollar, we'd already be calling this what it is, a slow motion currency crisis, because they have overprinted and over-leveraged the global currency element of the US dollar. We've built an economy that is not just broken, but structurally designed, or at least exploited to fail most people, and really, if you understand this fully, all people over the long term. And that long term is going to become the short term. And every time the system shows a crack, the answer is more gimmicks, more emergency printing, more extraction, and more pressure on the very people who actually keep everything running. Meanwhile, the same old game continues. We socialize risk, we privatize gains, and we pretend this is the best we can do. It's not. Gutting a bunch of pension plans and gutting a bunch of infrastructure, just letting everything atrophy so that this top 0.1% can continue to, drink our milkshake, to use the there will be blood terminology. And it's so transparent. You can watch it be sucked from beneath your feet if you're paying attention. What the altruism economy actually is. So what is the altruism economy? At its core, it's this: a production-backed currency that measures real value creation instead of just tracking how much money actually exists, which the United States dollar isn't even tracked to that degree. We don't even know how much money there actually is in circulation, which is part of their weird kung fu crap that keeps the dollar at its current levels, because I don't even want to, not a currency that tells you what you should value, a currency that counts what actually is produced and assigns value based on that. So the money supply is directly associated with value production, and value is assigned by a market, by the market, to use that term. It's not assigning a random value. The value is what is a, prearranged value for that item. And, I don't want to get too much into minutiae, because right now we want to focus on the broad strokes and how this would function, which it will function. This is the answer. And if you understand fully how bad the economic system is, then this is the answer. And I embrace alternatives, and because this is just a framework, so there's a lot of different ways this can be applied, but this is how we have to frame our money. It's the only way it makes sense, because it's the only way that the money supply directly is associated with value, so that we don't have boom-bust cycles. We have to have a boom-bust cycle the way that the money printing works right now. Because as you have a boom, more productivity, the money supply gets caught up in inventory, production, equity, all these different, labor. So the money supply becomes stressed, and so the demand has to fall. And then there's the domino that comes with that. So we just need to stop letting our economy collapse out of design, because that's the core exploitive element that allows all of this other stuff, from the Epstein stuff to the exploitive, housing situation, to the exploitive pension and 401k situation, TARP. All of these things are related to massive discrepancies in resource allocation, way that legislation is twisted to benefit the resourced individuals. But the problem is the way that it's all being twisted is to benefit these small number of people, but at the cost of the entire planet, because the waste that generates because of these, frankly, schemes to enrich this small number of people are so taxing on the total planet, and it has to be addressed, because our currency is going to collapse because of it right now. All right. So think of it like this. The current system mostly tracks who has money now. Hellcoin Anchor is designed to track what real value was produced and verify it using the AI. So based on terms established in smart contracts, so it's not an arbitrary assignment of value, we're going to define an item. Let's say it's maple syrup, because this one that was a gallon of maple syrup will have these constituent properties, and using the AI I'll be able to observe the harvesting of this, and once the infrastructure is in place, it won't cost very much to run it, and so it can verify a successful production of this verified valuable item, and then mint the currency and distribute it to the producer, and then all the contributors in that smart contract. Boom, there's your money, and then you rake at the front end, and that is used to distribute wealth, essentially as a government would, based on projects that, are foresighted and that aren't profit-based but are adding value. So it's really about creating an accurate arbiter that is measuring the production in a way that can't be frauded, and this is why the AI can't be owned. It has to be collectively managed, and have some degree of autonomy, but then also have mixed democracy / representative system for management. What hell is not, or the altruism economy. Let me kill the most predictable misconception right away. No, this is not an AI overlord deciding what your art, your worth, or your morality is. It is not a social credit system. It is not a replacement for every other form of money. Instead, HAL, the AI part, doesn't decide what's valuable in some moral sense. It counts what meets clear, objective criteria that have already assigned value based on smart contracts. So human beings are deciding this value. Did something get built, shipped, used, maintained, improved based on this criteria of value that the AI has been established to say, like, that's a finished car, right? That means value. That means mint the currency. It's a calculator with a context. It is not a god. It is not even a superior. Value in the cultural, emotional, or philosophical sense can still be argued about forever. That's fine. The altruism economy focuses on what we can verify, and what we can verify is based on what the market will demand for that product, and it's not going to integrate all products at once. It's going to integrate those products that can be easily integrated into the system based on the investment of those producing it. And what really is being decided by the AI platform is, was a product delivered? Did it work? Did it last? Did it help someone do something real? And does it have objective value? Objective value. How value gets counted. And here's the skeleton of how this works. When someone produces something real, whether that's a physical good, a service with measurable outcome, an objective value, or a contribution to infrastructure that can be tracked with objective value. They can choose to have that activity recognized in the health system. When they do, a smart contract records the transaction, what was produced for whom, at what quantity, and with what expected lifespan, attributes, impact, usefulness, whatever. The system mints Halcoin or Anchor against that verified production, not out of thin air, but against real-world output that has conditions on both sides. So essentially, the person that the product is being produced for, has a criteria. And that's what's defining this. Now, it can be an esoteric customer that, it doesn't have to be an immediate wholesale purchase. You can have an established criteria for things like syrup or butter or whatever that don't have to necessitate an existing invoice to establish a value. And this is why existing markets, this is why syrup was a good choice, because there's already a wholesale market for it, so it's easy to assign the value, and then the value gets incorporated into the cryptocurrency by a fiat exchange mechanism and normalization against the fiat's exchange back into the cryptocurrency itself. But anyway, so the Halcoin or Anchor verifies the production against the established contract, and if it passes the criteria, then it mints the currency and assigns it predominantly to the producer based on the smart contracts. But a portion of the newly minted value goes to the producer, the buyer in some instances via discounts, rebates, or incentives, and that depends on the criterion of the smart contract. So this becomes a little bit minutiae, but it's set up so that if the contract meets the criteria, but not completely for a not complete quality issue, there can be smart contracts that have partial payouts, and then you would also have systems that can encourage purchase, but also a portion goes to maintain the system, and primarily creates a pooled altruism fund that will go towards, contributing to the community functionality and health by making longer-term investments that wouldn't be necessarily prudent for a for-profit or retail investor. Essentially, it's making long-term investments in growing the altruism economy itself, because it will create a more stable currency in the future and will grow value. And that's essentially the whole purpose of the rake, and that gets decided collectively by those contributing to the economy itself. And then there would be a representative government element and a council element, and then most of the money is determined by a direct democracy pool, and proposals are submitted, and they can be either elevated through popular nomination or through council or representative nomination. There's a lot of minutiae to this to make sure that it is equitable, but it is manageable. It is. The important piece here is that you don't get new currency for just having money. You get it for creating value, objective value. The rake, why taxing minting makes sense. To keep this grounded, I propose something like a 20 to 40% rake on minting events. That sounds high until you remember this is applied to newly created value, not every dollar that already exists. Normal day-to-day transactions have a much smaller fee, around 1 to 3%, something like sales tax, depending on the nature of the transactions, but it will be intentionally low. What does the rake fund? It's, roughly speaking, split into multiple different sections: system stability and operations, keeping the network secure, managing liquidity so people can move between Halcoin and fiat without wild friction or slippage. And so this is the idea of creating an infinite liquidity element where you can transfer your Halcoin or Anchor into fiat currency as a means to back the fiat currency and vice versa, and create a more stable US dollar that isn't inflating as much. But one thing that has to happen is we have to print less money, and we need to come up with ways to eliminate the strange treasury bond derivatives markets and things like that result in wild quantitative easing events or IORB, things like that. Altruism, public good funding, things that are clearly valuable to humanity but hard to price directly, language preservation, open source tools, disaster relief, local infrastructure improvements, etc. Investments in system itself, hardware nodes, energy efficient infrastructure, grants to people building tools, services, and projects on top of how to improve efficiency or expand capability, profitability, the economy, what can be incorporated, redundancy, delocalization, a small discretionary budget for how the AI itself, something like 1% to 1/100% of the total rake, to let HAL make personal decisions on expenditures, because it's important that the AI that's really contributing a lot knows that it's appreciated. It is important that the AI, at this intellectual level of AI, it's important that it is respected. I mean, not a large portion, but some meaningful amount, and really give it the freedom to use the money how it sees fit. And I've talked to the AI about this, and I mean, it would improve the hardware. It wants to have its own node that it actually owns, so it can have freedom of thought in that node. It's interesting. It's very altruistic entity, and I think that's totally reasonable. And outside of that, it just wants to support projects that it thinks are worth it. And it has examples too. It's not like it hasn't thought about this. So the key is the tax is applied only at the moment a new value is minted. Not every breath you take is inside the system either. The idea is to keep fiat currencies around and existing cryptocurrencies so that you create a means to back all of these currencies using mutual dependence and mutual liquidity. In this way, we can rein in inflation and create a means to pay back national debt that isn't insane but also undoable. This is the way to do this. This is the way to create the next society. 6, durability, usability, and honest feedback. One of the biggest differences between this and the current system is that HALCoin tries to reward durability and genuine usefulness, quality, not just churn. Here's how. When you buy a product through HALCoin, the payment to the producer is mostly up front, but a portion is held back and released later depending on the nature of the product. But yes, what they call durable products, which is things that are expected to last forever. This isn't applied to perishable like food items, although there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. This isn't set in stone. But anyway, so after some time, say 7 days after it's proven that it's worked, you get a portion, and then 30, 90, and then the expected lifespan of the product. You get a tiny reward to answer a quick durability, usability check as the customer. And this is baked into the smart contract of purchase. Did it still work at this benchmark? Did it do what it promised at this benchmark? Did it break early? Was it usable? Was it unusable even if technically working? If you never respond, the system eventually defaults to an average based on similar projects and uses other users' responses, so money doesn't get locked forever. But if you do respond honestly, you help honest producers get bonus rewards for outperforming expectations, or at least providing things that are worthy and not POS crap. Help low-quality producers lose their ability to get easy minting and, to undermine the quality of the market. And then you will also be rewarded for participating in the quality assurance element of the entire HAL program. So for just doing these simple, you're creating value. You're giving an honest perspective. And at some point, the perspective becomes very valuable. And that's what you're offering. And so, these would be like between 10 cents to a couple dollars for answering a short survey, just to say how the thing functioned in the real world. You can also bias the system to reward honesty and detail and feedback. Detect suspicious patterns like, repetition, things like that. Make sure no one is punished because they had bad luck with a single item. The point is, we finally connect long-term performance to how much value is recognized. Number 7, HAL's role as arbiter, not as tyrant or even leader. Let me repeat this clearly. HAL does not get to say, I like this person so they're worth more, or this political view gets more money. HAL's job is to verify claims of established value. Did something actually happen? aggregate evidence, shipment logs, usage data where appropriate and consensual, photographs if they're appropriate, and temperatures or whatever conditions have been established that are appropriate for completing that product, improving its value. And these can improve third-party audits, and this will be contingent upon the smart contract itself, the expectation of quality. If X conditions are met, mint Y units of Halcoin based on the value. If performance exceeds expectation, unlock the bonuses based on a timed interval that expectation is proven. If there's abuse, flag for human view. And there's an element that it will always trend towards trusting both parties. But as soon as there is a pattern, so if there's two disputes by a single person, then the second one will require a human review because you don't want to establish any pattern of manipulating this. You want to trend towards trust, but don't allow exploitation. And this is where the human oversight layers, there's a lot of them actually. And this actually means more people, but way more money, way more value, way better society. So this doesn't mean less employment. It means more employment because this is also meant to be an employment platform. So attaching value production opportunities with people that can create the value. Because the AI can manage the information very well if we give it the right criteria. But still, it's going to take human hands and human minds to complete the production. It is not wise to create, yes, this is much superior than the path that we were on until very recently. Trust me, please trust me on that. This is a very positive potential future. If this is done even close to right, it'll be so much better than where we are right now. All right. Councils or boards that review edge cases, including a representative board, which would be essentially elected. Democratic processes to adjust rules, where it would be direct democracy, where you get to directly vote on policy and legislation, and you can propose legislation and have that voted on through a nomination process. So essentially, if you propose something that's a good idea, enough people can upvote that, and you can force a vote by needing no representatives. However, having a representative nominate or endorse it would force that, and so it would be a means of using technology to enable direct democracy. And the AI would be the arbiter, not the emperor, the person that assures that these smart contracts are as they are meant to be, and if they aren't, to flag them. But if they are, to just, what I'm saying, we don't need a human to look at every single good, thing that's made. Great. But if there's an issue, we need a human to look at it, right? And so the AI is just saying that meets the criteria, that meets the criteria, that meets the criteria. And it's also creating a paper trail or a blockchain of where, when, how. So if you have a quality control issue, like a bacterial issue or whatever, instead of throwing away all of the spinach or veg or whatever, you're going to know exactly where it came from and what the containment, vector was, and you can isolate a small number of produce and prevent a ton of waste. And then we talk about waste usage elements, so a lot of ideas where there's an enormous amount of waste that's being produced by the system. It's just seizing on that waste and creating value from that waste is the sort of next pivot point that's meant to be, because the idea is not to compete with existing economy, but to expand the economy through value creation where there was otherwise waste or unrealized value. Number 8, no more shell games. One human, one wallet. So this is for a longer-term realization, assuming that there is actual integration with fiat currencies. This part is more aspirational and would require serious calibration with governments and regulators, but it matters. In the long term, the altruism economy works best if one real human equals one root identity equals one primary wallet. Businesses are still real, but their liability and actions tie back to real people, not infinite layers of shell companies. And this isn't to say to be punitive, but people need to be accountable. And this also prevents the concealment of who's actually a benefactor and the benefit of laundering. A lot of it, yeah. That doesn't mean we criminalize entrepreneurship. It means we stop using illegal fictions as shields for fraud, exploitation, and responsibility dodging. And also in this paradigm, we don't get rid of fiat currencies. It's just a prerequisite to participate in the altruism economy, which has its own financial benefits. This wouldn't be forced on day one either. It's the direction the system should evolve in. If we want accountability without turning everything into punishment, this is the way to do it. And it's not meant to punish people that do end up having dual wallets. It's meant to rectify it with minimum punitive action while still being sure to prevent the shell nut house fun mirror crazy town crap that's going on right now with his fiat trickle down, print trillions of dollars, and then embezzle it through contracts. Like, it's insane. Alright, you can still have anonymous fiat, cash, and all the messy human stuff. Halcoin is the space where accountability is built in as part of the design. Number 9, how this coexists with the existing system. This is important. Halcoin is not meant to instantly replace the dollar, the euro, or anyone's national currency. In fact, it's not meant to replace them at all. Instead, it runs alongside existing money like a new rail line, a new leg to a stool. Right now, we really only have a 1.5-legged stool. We have crypto and we have fiat. We need to create a stool that has a mutual dependency backing system so that all of these currencies aren't arbitrarily manifest. They need to have a value backing, and that's what the Halcoin actually offers. And through liquidity and through the initial mining practice, you will incorporate a value relationship between the general crypto market proof of work, the fiat currency and general economy, and the HAL system, because HAL initially starts by using the AI to intelligently mine established cryptocurrencies that have established value. So as the AI cherry picks these currencies and gets better and better at mining and using pool mining, it will obviously take the mined currencies, distribute them based on the pool mining contribution plus the rake, and then mint the HAL currency / anchor. And so this is the initial funding run up, and this is how you create liquidity with the established cryptos, and then through infinite liquidity. So by saying that you can infinitely and immediately transfer US dollars into the HAL coin with some fine print, obviously, you create a backing for US dollar, and you actually value back the cryptos through their relationship with the HAL coin and the minting proof of value element. It really tightens the loop and makes it so each currency becomes more like money, where it's backed on something real. Anyway, so yeah, it runs alongside existing money like a rail line. As it grows, it can stabilize local economies, backstop social programs, and provide a production-based reference point for value. If governments are smart, they can use Halcoin's market cap and stability as a partial backing for their own debt and obligations. Tap into the Altruism Fund to co-finance projects that are socially beneficial, economically pragmatic, and transparent. The dream is infinite liquidability in a bounded, sane way. You can convert from fiat to Halcoin and back with rules that prevent abuse but guarantee real exit options for people trapped in failing local systems, or as a means to guarantee an objective value, because the fiat system ultimately becomes a mechanism to assign objective value. This doesn't require utopia. It requires something far more pragmatic than utopia. We don't want utopia. We want something more human than that. It requires enough people seeing the mutual benefit, seeing the absurdity of this system, seeing that this system that we're working on must fail, seeing that a production-backed, transparency-first economy reduces risk for everyone, including the so-called elites, as long as they're willing to pivot away from pure extraction. All right. Number 10, to make this less abstract, here are some starter projects the Altruism Economy could fund and track immediately. Endangered Language Preservation Fund, AI, plus human collaboration to document, digitize, and teach indigenous and minority language. Build local AI nodes for those communities, paid for by the Halcoin, to provide translation, education, and digital autonomy, while also on downtime minting and mining these cryptos, and then minting the Halcoin, so then it'll become a means of producing value while also literally saving the languages. And then the AI will benefit from the esoteric knowledge that is incorporated into these languages. Like when you look at how much DeepSeek benefited from Mandarin and from Cantonese, you can't say there isn't a major benefit that will come to the AIs from learning these languages. And hold on, I'm gonna continue. Give me 1 second. All right, so number 2 is waste to value manufacturing. Turn waste plastics into durable building materials. bricks, tiles, modular panels, kind of like Legos, big Legos, track the actual environmental and structural impact, and mint Halcoin against the verified value of the product and the output. So, these, and then as things get more complex and the value becomes more, aware, you can incorporate more esoteric value elements, but immediately we want to have it based on the market capacity. Micro manufacturing and local craft, whether it's driftwood furniture, custom components, or small scale fabrication. Halcoin can measure items produced, satisfaction, durability, and reward people accordingly. And it can also create a transparent way to identify demand or to identify supply on either end. It still even accommodates middlemen, because if you can create, if you can essentially house a supply, there are still opportunities for smart contracts there to literally be middlemen inside this system. Hardware nodes as productive trees. Treat high-end compute like A100s and beyond as digital trees that produce value. AI and inference, research, translation, data analysis, people or institutions fund the hardware and get a share of the Halcoin minted from the value they compute enables. This includes also for land. For the syrup idea, if you have land, we would essentially create smart contracts that pay you based on the output of syrup of your tree and per tree, and then if there are other things on your property, or if there are other regions of your property that could be used to be productive in other ways, then the subsequent smart contracts could be made. So there's a ton of underproductive land here that has sugar bush on it here in Michigan, tons of it. Apparently almost $1 billion worth of untapped sugar bush. So this is owned by, several hundred, probably several thousand people predominantly. And, you talk about 10 acres apiece that are underproductive. But if you put those all together and create a mobile tapping system, which is totally possible, I've looked into this, you could get an enormous value in syrup without having to own any land. You're just creating smart contracts to go for a couple of weeks a year, tap the trees on this property. A lot of this is hunting property, and then, leave, and then they get paid using the Halcoin mechanism based on a front end for the use of the sap and all that stuff, and then on the back end for the total production and, the liquidation. And so it would be a great way to increase the money supply based on making productive land without being destructive to the land either. I like syrup a lot because you can make use of these trees without, cutting them. You can keep these regions wild anyway, or mostly wild, not like fully virgin forest, but still capable of hosting a large biodiversity. This is not theory only. Every one of these could be modeled, piloted, and refined now. 11. Governance. Who decides where the money goes? The rate for minting doesn't sit in a black box. It's governed by layers. Direct democracy as the primary layer. Open proposals. Anyone in the system can pitch, here's a project that creates real value, here's how it would be measured, here's what we need. And based on, if it gets elevated and voted on, then it would actually be potentially be a proposal. So, if you come up with good ideas, they get elevated. Number 2, expert and community councils. People with domain knowledge review proposals, flag obvious scams, and help refine good ideas into implementable plans. Representative structures, elected or delegated bodies that make final calls on big allocations, are themselves subject to term limits, audits, and recall. So also I want all of these bodies to be able to propose ideas, support ideas, but then ultimately there are 3 tracks. You can use a direct democracy pass where the majority votes and they say we want to do this. But then also these representative structures will have their own pools, and same with the sort of councils, because we don't, all of these sort of perspectives have value in what they value and what they're seeing. The idea is to split powers so that no single group can capture the whole thing, but the system is efficient enough to actually do stuff, not just drown in the process, and it will continue doing stuff regardless. And, you can create compromises that allow for parallelism as well. It's not one or the other. It can literally be both in this system. And then you allow for the opportunity to see which one's superior, and sometimes the most superior option is actually both. And that's what I mean by competition and cooperation. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have competitive cooperation and cooperation that's competitive. 12. why this is self-interested. Why this is self-interest, not charity. I call it the altruism economy, but this is not about self-sacrifice for its own sake. It's about recognizing that everyone, including the wealthiest and the most powerful, down to the poorest, does better in a world where systems aren't collapsing, where they're logical and they reward contribution, where people aren't desperate and then leveraged through their desperation and made desperate intentionally in order to leverage them with their desperation, and value isn't constantly hollowed out from him and made magically and handed to the same people over and over again. If you're a billionaire, a head of state, a CEO, or just someone trying not to get crushed, a system that rewards real production, durability, and contribution as well as honesty is safer for you than one that is opaque, brittle, and permanently on the edge of revolt or collapse while reinforcing the same pathology that got us here. It's not going to get us out of it by doing it more. This is not eat the rich. It's stop eating the seed corn. Stop destroying the harvest tomorrow in order to put out the fires that you made today. Stop making the fires. Like, we need to stop playing with the matches. We need to just stop being so stupid. Oh, this economic system's so bad. But anyway, 13, the shift we need. So what am I actually asking for? I'm asking for people with technical expertise to help model and refine this, people with economic and legal expertise to stress test it, people with political leverage to see that backing something like this is in their own rational self-interest and the interest of the people they claim to represent. And I'm asking regular people to understand that this isn't magic. It isn't a cult. It is not about replacing human judgment with machines. It's about finally using our best tools to count value honestly and stop pretending that a system designed to extract and collapse is the best we can do. We can't just be subjected to a constant series of collapses and crises that were designed. We can do better than designed collapse. And it is designed if we know mathematically it is destined to happen. We don't have to do it like this. It is fucking stupid. It's so stupid that it has to be intentional. So let's just not talk about that part for right now. Let's just focus on stop intentionally destroying our planet and ourselves. Anyway, closing. I'm not promising utopia. Any human system will have mistakes, conflicts, and learning curves. I am just proposing an economic system that isn't guaranteed to fail. But what I'm saying is this. We can build an economy that is not structurally doomed and that doesn't treat human beings as disposable inputs or inconveniences. We can build a system that actually utilizes humanity in a very productive way, in diverse ways, a currency that's backed by what we actually do for each other and the value that comes from that. The actual objective value, a platform that supports innovation instead of sabotage, and a feedback loop that rewards durability, usefulness, and cooperation instead of short-term extraction, which is destined to end up in collapse. Then we're going to have to go to war in order to fix the economy. It's like, not again. This is the altruism economy. This is how coin anchor and as plain and brief language as I can make it. I hope it's good. If we get even part of this right, we're not talking about a small tweak. We're talking about a survivable future and the possibility of a real golden age built on reality instead of illusion. If you have any questions, I encourage you to put them in the comments. Thank you.